And today, Donald Trump, for the first time, revealed his foreign policy team. Mr. Trump listing the names of 5 people who are counseling him. Some of them may be known to you, including Waleed Fares, a Fox News Mideast expert and advisor to Congress on terrorism, among others. You can see Senator Jeff Sessions there as well. Joining me now, Stephen Miller, who's a senior advisor to the Trump campaign and former advisor to Republican Senator Jeff Sessions, and Marc Thiessen, who's a Fox News contributor and former chief speechwriter to President George W. Bush. Great to see you both. So,
Good
Marc,
to see you, Megan.
Your thoughts on what we heard from Trump today at AIPAC and this foreign policy team he's now announcing?
Yeah, so we heard today the scripted Donald Trump and the unscripted Donald Trump. At AIPAC, we heard the scripted Donald Trump, and it was pretty good. He knows how to do this. Is the first time he's ever delivered a prepared speech, and he did a pretty good job. He hit all the grace notes, though there were some things in there that were surprising. He said both that he would scrap the Iran deal and also enforce it, which is kind of incoherent. But then we heard the unscripted Donald Trump at the Washington Post, and it was an absolute disaster.
He sat down and had a meeting with their editorial board today.
He had a meeting with the editorial board, and it was sort of a stream of consciousness Donald Trump in this open meeting, and it was a debacle. I mean, he said that our military bases in Asia, they don't serve any purpose for us whatsoever. He said that NATO was an alliance for an earlier time, and that we spend hundreds of billions of dollars on NATO, which is factually incorrect. We do not spend hundreds of billions of dollars on NATO, and that we can't afford it anymore. And he basically said we can't afford to lead the world anymore. So at AIPAC, he says we're going to lead a global coalition to dismantle Iran's terror network, but at the Washington Post he says we're a poor and debtor nation and we can't afford to lead anymore. Those are incompatible things. So Donald Trump unscripted is very different and much scarier than Donald Trump when he's reading a speech.
What of that, Stephen? What about Marc's claims in particular on you know, what he said in terms of the money that we spend on NATO?
Hey, great to be here tonight. Well, Marc, I hope you feel better now that you've gotten all that off your chest. It's funny, Marc's complaining about or talking about the scripted remarks tonight, but I heard Marc practicing his speech in the green room, and it was identical to what he just said to you. So I guess Marc likes scripted remarks too. But I don't really know where to begin with
what... Let's keep it a little higher brow than that, Stephen.
Really? That's the best you can do, Stephen?
I can do better.
Really?
Here's one
Seriously?
for you. Here's one for you. Okay? Yeah. You're talking about NATO. I have a question for you, Marc. If there's a war guarantee in NATO. If Russia incurs on Ukraine's borders, would you send American troops to fight and die in Ukraine? I suspect the answer to that question is no.
Before we put
hold
Marc
on, Stephen.
Before we put Marc under the microscope, because he's not yet running for president, maybe someday.
Right.
But could you just respond, Stephen, to respond to Marc's claims about what Trump said on NATO, and he says that he's factually inaccurate in his claims about what we spend on NATO.
Right. I was just getting through that. The reality is that NATO is an organization made many decades ago that is incongruent with our current foreign policy challenges. With respect to Iran and dismantling Iran's global terror networks, that can be accomplished with economic sanctions, not with costly nation building that Marc has supported throughout his career that has drained our blood and treasure and made us less safe. And so this is a major choice in this election. And so what I'm saying tonight to voters as the representative of the Trump campaign is, if you want more foreign wars, if you want to lose more soldiers, more blood, and more treasure fighting and dying overseas in one country after another country after another country, then you can follow the path that other candidates have laid out and that Marc supports. Yeah. But we're talking about defending the core interests of the United States.
Let him respond. It sounds like, you know, this sounds a lot like Rand Paul. We've heard this same sort of line, which was very popular with some voters, Marc.
Yeah, I think that's unfair, Megan, because actually Donald Trump makes Rand Paul look like a neocon. I mean, that's the problem with Rand Paul's foreign policy. And we just saw in Stephen's answer to you the incompetence when it comes to foreign policy of the Trump operation, because Ukraine is not a member of NATO, so there is no Article 5 commitment.
No, but
so apparently you and Donald Trump don't know that.
I was asking you about the effort. I was asking you about the long-standing effort to get Ukraine, to get Georgia, to get other Eastern Bloc countries to join NATO. There is an effort to expand NATO.
I'm going to have to get rid of you if you don't stop talking. Okay, thank you. My job is to maintain order. That's it. Okay. I'm going to let Mark speak, and then I'm going to let you speak again, Stephen. Let him speak uninterrupted,
Thank you.
please. Go ahead, Mark.
So what Donald Trump laid out today in his Washington Post interview was a foreign policy that basically comes to this: withdraw from the world so we can focus on nation building here at home, pull back from our allies in Europe and Asia, and embrace people like Vladimir Putin, and we basically let Europe lead and we lead from behind. That is the Obama foreign policy. And Stephen, here's a question for you. Let's play a little game called Who Said It, Donald Trump or Barack Obama. Here's a quote: "Over the last decade, we have spent $1 trillion on war at a time of rising debt and hard economic times. It's time to focus on nation building here at home."
Well, we all know that President Obama has talked about nation building here at home. The problem is he hasn't done that because he's left our border wide open. He's sent all of our manufacturing jobs overseas, and he's hollowed out the middle class, an agenda you support also, Mark. And the point that I was making with NATO is that there has been an effort to get Eastern Bloc countries to join NATO as part of the effort to try and push back Putin that would put the United States in a position of offering war guarantees to countries that we're not going to fight and die for. And this has been a major debate, and you know that.
Okay.
And with respect to his speech today at AIPAC,
we gotta go,
and this
so
is
quickly.
important, he laid out a plan to sanction Iran, to dismantle their terror networks, to protect our vital economic interests. And that combined with bringing back our manufacturing jobs, protecting our border, and protecting American workers will revitalize our middle class and say stark contrast to the globalism of Mark and his donors.
No more. It's over. I don't know how this got so
His
mean.
donor friends.
We don't like mean here in the Kelly File. Let's be friendly.
I thought it was fun and great. I enjoyed it a lot.
I don't think you guys like each other. It's great to see you nonetheless.